My lords, today we are going to revisit Sol Variants because, in exploration of the beta universe, we found a new one, which we sort of accidentally blew up. I should note that it is also incredibly rare. For this variant to occur, no Sol-using empire must exist, i.e. the UNE, the Theians, the Blooms of Gaea, and or the Commonwealth of Man. From this point, there is a 49% chance that Sol won't exist at all, a 40% chance that you could find one of the pre-FTL variants, more on those later, a 10% chance that we'd find Earth as a tomb world, and finally, a 1% chance that we will find the Celestial Orrery, which I'll get onto shortly. Incidentally, in our investigations, we've also found a brand new alien species that we've codenamed Steve the Starfish. Enjoy the wiggles. But for now, we'll go back to the Sol variants. There are 13 in total, and I'll begin with the newest and the most exciting one. This is the one that we found in the beta universe, and it's codenamed Celestial Orrery. As you know, we've discovered several Sol variants before. This one, however, was very different. Its star, i.e. Sol, was not where it should be, and many of the planetary bodies were also well off their regular orbits. It was entirely bizarre. Upon closer inspection of the system, we detected that there were strange gravimetric readings throughout the whole star system. They were pulsing from the inner asteroid belt to the desolate planet at the heart of the system, where the star should have been. We quickly established that the gravitational stability of the star system was maintained by dark matter emitters that were positioned within an asteroid belt. These emitters were controlled by a supercomputer that was located on the central planet. Records from this central computer suggested that the entire system was an experiment for gravity manipulation and was established by an unknown but incredibly ancient civilization. We were left with two options: leave the system as it was and use the colossal research computer for our own gains, and I should state, the tech output this gave us was colossal. Or we could take the machine apart and try to understand how it worked. Despite the massive research gains the computer could give us, we decided to take the machine apart, noting that it was probably a bad idea. It did not go well. The entire star system imploded. Every stellar body was utterly destroyed, including our own investigating science team. It appears that for the first time, we have managed to utterly destroy our own solar system. Oops. A lesson in caution for us indeed. This brings us sharply back to our other explorations. There are 12 more variants of Sol and Earth, and we've discovered them by exploring other dimensions and timelines. I'll start with a somewhat depressing one, codenamed Nuclear Wasteland, or more fancifully, Cockroach Earth. In this timeline, Earth has been thoroughly ravaged in a nuclear war. Our survey confirmed that this Earth variant was once a thriving tropical paradise before it was laid waste to by global thermonuclear war. Most higher life forms, including the post-atomic civilization that initiated the apocalyptic exchange, were killed off in the wasteland that remains after the dust settled. There were, however, some survivors, namely a pre-sapient species of cockroaches who appear to be rather adaptive. A sad end for humanity, but a slight win for these cockroaches. Next we have the Theian timeline. Also known as the Federated Theian Preservers, in this timeline the United Nations of Earth exist, however they appear to be diminished, but ourselves, the Commonwealth of Man, do not appear to have established any hold in the galaxy. Regarding the Theians, billions of years ago, two planets formed from the primordial material in orbit of Sol, ancient Earth and Theia. Rudimentary life evolved on both worlds, of a biological nature on Earth and of a lithoid nature on Theia. For eons, these sister planets maintained a peaceful revolution around their star, and then came a cataclysm. The planets collided, and at the moment of impact, microbial life was exchanged. Earth survived, and from the debris came a moon, Luna. What remained of Theia was jettisoned from the Sol system. Clinging to this runaway rock, life from ancient Theia would traverse the void for many ages before meeting the gravity well of a different star, Iterwin. The rock soon made violent landfall on one of the system's worlds, introducing its lithoid species to a new biosphere, and a few short millennia later, the Theians had once again taken to the stars, seeking to understand the universe as well as their own heritage. Theian preservers operated as an Orrenic bureaucracy. They have an oligarchic government type which promotes meritocracy. They also appear to be strongly reliant on mining guilds. The Theians are fanatically materialistic, but also somewhat pacifistic. As a people, they tend to be wasteful deviants, but effective miners, and even appear to leak exotic gas. The Theian Empire appear to be, at least in this timeline, fairly successful. They've made it to FTL travel at least, but they do share a neighbouring border with the robotic empire we're familiar with, the XT489 Eliminators. Perhaps we should check back in a few decades and see how they fare. The next timeline we visited was disturbing indeed. Sol did not exist. There was no sun of our solar system, and where it should be was simply empty. Most worrying indeed. The fifth timeline we searched contains an empire called the Earth Custodianship. The Custodians were originally designed to function as robotic servants and workers, simplifying everyday life for their human creators by performing tasks. As the robotic creators retreated into lives of leisure and comfort, which was made possible by increasing levels of automation, the Custodians were gradually assigned higher and higher levels of function in human society. Eventually, all facets of civilization on Earth were run and controlled by the Custodians, with their makers relegated to an existence as pampered but passive dependents. As technological development brought the Custodians towards interstellar exploration, their duty remained clear: to protect and serve organics who, without the gentle guidance of logical machines, would turn to chaos and destruction. These automatons appear to be rogue servitors. They operate as a Gestalt hive mind, and it is understood that a single AI controls the entire cohort of machines. It appears that the machine intelligence works to reduce vulnerability by increasing modularity, reducing the strain by deploying additional semi-independent units through what it designates as delegated functions. The machines appear to be high maintenance, but have rather complex social predictive models that help the units emulate appropriate emotions, but also elicit favourable responses from organics and synthetics alike. They also appear to be collapsible with flexible joints that enable them to fold neatly into stacks during transportation. They can then self-assemble on site. The sixth timeline we investigated had Earth as one would expect. It was intact, as was the rest of the Sol system, but for reasons unknown, even in the year 2200, humanity was locked in the late medieval age. It appears they had a firm grasp of metallurgy and have invented the printing press, but they still lived in somewhat primitive dwellings, and they also frequently war with one another. Humanity at this stage had three main ethics: authoritarian, spiritualist, and xenophobe. It is noteworthy that they would be able to field three armies, all primitive, feudal levies. The seventh timeline was humanity further along in its development. This time they were in the Machine Age. They displayed fanatic militarist and materialist ethics, and could field 5 industrial strength armies, namely the British Armed Forces, the German Wehrmacht, the Imperial Japanese Forces, the Soviet Red Army, and finally the US Armed Forces. The 8th timeline was similar to the previous, but this time humanity had made it to at least the early space age. Whatever it was that prevented them from progressing previously may have impacted them, but they clearly solved it that much quicker, and are in reality only a few decades behind where we are in development. By this point, humanity appears to have pivoted to be fanatic egalitarian and xenophilic. They could field 5 post-atomic armies at this point, namely the Chinese PLA, the EU Combined Forces, the Russian Armed Forces, the US Armed Forces East, and the US Armed Forces West. Humanity had also launched a second ISS space station, and my best guess is that they would be the foundation for the future United Nations of Earth. Next up, we found an empire that had renamed Earth to Terra, and called itself the Imperium of Man. Interestingly, this empire appears to be quite common across the timelines. They are led by a somewhat psionic being known only as the Emperor, and have highly advanced genetic warriors who aggressively conduct war on the other alien species of the galaxy. They are effectively fanatic purifiers, though they do appear to be able to conduct some diplomatic relations with aliens when required. All in all, this galaxy appears very grim and dark indeed. On to the 10th timeline now, and it is rather terrifying. Here we find humanity taking the place of the fallen Empire, the militant isolationists, i.e. the Empire who we know committed terrible genocides such as the Purge of Shalash. It appears, my lords, that this human variant is based upon us, the Commonwealth of Man, and we wonder what could have happened to push us down such an isolationist path. Perhaps we shall indeed fall into disrepute one day and become a fallen empire. Incidentally, we have also witnessed the UNE become the xenophilic fallen empire, known as the Enigmatic Observers. Their naive, alien-loving approach appears to have paid off somewhat, although we can only speculate on why or how they became fallen. Certainly, if this timeline was to have a war in heaven, it would be truly historic. Humanity fighting one another on both sides of the greatest war the galaxy has ever seen. It's almost as if we would find ourselves back in that grim, dark universe. Although at least this time, hopefully no gods would be involved. The 11th timeline is next, and this one is rather wild. Humanity appears to have evolved, or devolved if you like, decide that for yourselves, into plants. This Earth variant is an empire known as the Blooms of Gaea. Our intelligence reports the following. A diet rich in vegetables and a keptoplasmitic mutation eventually gifted these mammals with an unusual ability: photosynthesis. Unburdened by hunger, the homines plantae evolved as placid, plant-like primitives who would favour sunbathing over hunting. Technological advancements were balanced against the need to preserve their environment. These people eventually developed FTL technology, slow and steady like trees, raising their branches to the sky. Now they're ready to spread their bloom across the galaxy, but their roots remain firmly planted on their homeworld of Gaea. This human variant are pacifists. They are fanatically egalitarian, radiotropic, conservationists. They are agrarian, but are also slow learners and slow breeders. An interesting timeline indeed. The penultimate timeline, before we discuss our own, was the infiltration of reptilian aliens, who covertly assumed positions of power across Earth and eventually took control, enslaving humanity to the whims of lizard creatures. I hope I don't need to say it, but never trust the lizardmen. Finally, this brings us on to our own current timeline, which we of course have significant information on. In our own timeline, it wasn't until the 20th century that space travel became a real possibility. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched the first artificial satellite, Sputnik, into orbit around Earth. This marked the beginning of the space age, a time of rapid technological advancement and exploration. In 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to travel into space, making a 108-minute orbit around Earth. This achievement was soon followed by the United States' own space program, which included the first manned moon landing by astronauts Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin in 1969. Several decades of spaceflight would continue until the beginning of the 21st century, where, due to rising costs and a number of fatal accidents, but ultimately politics, meant that spaceflight was put on hold. For a time, it appeared that the individual states who occupied Earth were less interested in reaching for the stars, and thus it seemed that private corporations would surpass them. It's not known, or not clear, what changed, or why, but midway through the 21st century there was a cultural shift on Earth. Humanity longed for the stars once more. There was a generation born too late to explore Earth, but too soon to explore space, and they would leave their children and grandchildren a great gift. At the time, 193 states making up the United Nations came together for the first time in many decades and made a choice to attempt something truly wonderful. They were going to make spaceflight a possibility once more, humanity would explore the stars. Thus began the Ulysses Initiative. In the year 2048, the project would be to date the greatest undertaking by humanity. 6 wondrous arc ships were built in low Earth orbit over the next 50 years. They would house 250,000 colonists each, men and women who volunteered to explore the stars. Alpha Centauri would be the target destination. All 6 ships would travel together. The journey was estimated to take approximately 108 years, and as such, the crews and colonists would be put into cryostasis for the duration. As you well know, my lords, we did not ever reach Alpha Centauri. It is not entirely clear exactly what happened, but according to fragmented ship logs, we passed into the Oort cloud at the edge of our solar system and hit some sort of space-time anomaly, potentially a wormhole, that would forever change our fate. Our ship carried the designation Chrysanthemum, and you can still visit it in the Grand Archive above Unity. And now, in 2300, we stand at the threshold of an uncertain future, a future where our unity, our very survival, and our destiny as a species are at stake. In times of great challenge and discovery, we must remember one simple, undeniable truth. Humanity must come first. Let no threat, no fear, and no division make us forget who we are and what we fight for. Our survival, our progress, and our dreams must come first. Humanity first, not out of arrogance or fear, but out of the responsibility that we bear to one another, and to those who will come after us. Together, we will shape our destiny. Together, we will ensure that humanity endures, thrives, and reaches heights that we never dared to imagine, for the glory of the Commonwealth of Man.